Every single day, 50,000 people cross London Bridge, walking directly above the spot where Roman engineers drove oak piles into a riverbed and unknowingly gave birth to the most powerful city on earth. Picture yourself standing in Trafalgar Square and spinning the clock backwards. Buildings dissolve, streets turn to mud. Saxon traders appear, then Roman soldiers, until there is nothing left but a river and silence. Rome built this city. Vikings burned it. Fire consumed it. Bombs leveled it. London should have perished 5 times over. Instead, it became the largest city on the planet. Drawing on artificial intelligence trained on paintings, historical records, and archaeological findings, we have brought every era back to life. 2,000 years, one story. This is the complete history of London. 2,000 years ago, London does not exist. There is only a grey tidal river, twice as wide as it is today, and marshland stretching to the horizon. People do live nearby. Britons farm the higher ground in what is now Wimbledon, Ilford, and Epping Forest. But this wet strip of riverbank? Worthless. No one builds here. No one wants it. And yet, this precise location holds a hidden advantage. Between 2 gentle hills, the Thames narrows just enough to bridge, while remaining deep enough to welcome ocean-going vessels. For thousands of years, no one notices. Then, in the summer of 43 AD, ships appear off the coast of Britain. Roman ships. Hundreds of them. 40,000 soldiers. The conquest of Britain has begun. But when Rome reaches that narrow bend in the river, they do not build a city. They build a bridge. Oak piles hammered into the riverbed on almost the exact spot where London Bridge stands today. Rome builds bridges to move armies. This one moves everything else. The roads of the new province all converge on this crossing. Traders arrive, then soldiers, then merchants from Gaul, sailors from Spain, craftsmen from Italy. A boomtown bursts into life on the north bank. Timber houses, wharves, warehouses packed with wine and olive oil. They call it Londinium. Within a decade, 10,000 people call it home. No walls, no defenses. Why would they need any? They're about to find out. In the year 60, Rome flogs a widowed queen named Boudica and assaults her daughters. Her tribe rises up, then another, then tens of thousands of warriors, burning everything Roman in their path as they sweep south. And Londinium has no army. The governor makes a cold, hard decision. The city cannot be saved. Those who cannot flee are left behind. Boudica burns Londinium to the ground. Dig a few meters beneath the streets of the City of London today, and you will hit it. A layer of red, scorched earth. The fire is still in the ground 2,000 years later. London was barely a decade old, and it was already dead. But Rome does not retreat. Rome responds in stone. The city rises again, not as a trading post this time, but as a declaration. A forum with a basilica, the largest building north of the Alps. Bathhouses, a governor's palace, an amphitheatre packed with 7,000 roaring spectators. Walk these streets at their peak, around the year 120, and you would hear a dozen languages before breakfast. Perhaps 60,000 people, merchants, soldiers, slaves, priests, crammed into the greatest city Britain had ever known. Londinium is not merely surviving, it is the capital. But empires grow old, and you can see the fear arrive in London, written in stone. Around the year 200, a shrinking city erects the largest wall in Roman Britain, 3 kilometers long, 85,000 tons of stone. Cities at their peak do not build walls like that. Frightened ones do. Trade dries up, buildings stand empty, the empire is bleeding out elsewhere, and with each passing decade, less and less of it reaches Britain. Then, in 410, a letter arrives from the emperor himself. Rome can no longer protect you. Defend yourselves. The legions march away. No battle, no fire. The greatest city in Britain simply empties. And for the next 400 years, almost no one will dare to live here. For generations, the ruins just stand there. The new people of Britain, the Saxons, know the city exists. They can see the walls from the river, but they will not move in. The Saxons are farmers, village people. They build in timber and thatch, and they have no use for a stone labyrinth they cannot repair. But it is more than practical. To them, these silent ruins feel wrong, haunted. Saxon poets look at Roman stonework and call it the work of giants, because surely no human hand could have raised this. They will not live in the ghost city, so they leave it alone. A new London grows on the open riverbank just to the west of the old walls. They call it Londonvich. Today it lies buried beneath Covent Garden, and no one walking through that neighborhood has any idea. And it thrives. By the 700s, ships crowd the shore, amber from the Baltic, wine and millstones from the Rhineland, pottery from France. A monk named Bede describes it as a market of many nations, 10,000 people, no walls, no defenses. Sound familiar? Because across the North Sea, other men have heard about the wealth of Britain, and they are building ships. In 842, Viking longships come up the Thames. The chronicles record what follows simply as the Great Slaughter. 9 years later, they return with 350 ships, and then the raids stop being raids. A Viking great army winters in London itself, and Saxon England collapses kingdom by kingdom. One king refuses to fall. Alfred of Wessex, the only English-born king history has ever called the Great. He fights the Danes to a standstill. In 886, he retakes London, and then he makes a decision that redraws the map forever. He looks at open, defenseless Londonvich and abandons it. He moves everyone back inside the haunted Roman walls, because fear of the Vikings has finally outweighed fear of the ghosts. After 400 years, the old city lives again. Londonvich is left to decay. People call it simply the Old Settlement, Eldvich. Say that word for 1,000 years, and it wears down to Aldwych. It is still a street in central London today. Inside the repaired walls, London hardens into the most formidable fortress town in England, so valuable that Danish and Saxon kings fight over it for more than a century, until a pious king named Edward builds something new, a great abbey on marshy ground to the west of the city, Westminster. From this moment, London has two hearts, the city for money, Westminster for power. It still does today. Then, in January 1066, Edward dies without an heir, and across the sea, a duke insists the throne was promised to him. The duke's name is William, but the crown goes to someone else, Harold Godwinson, the man who stood at Edward's deathbed, brother of the Queen, the most powerful nobleman in England, and the dying king's own chosen successor. He is crowned the very next day in the brand new abbey, on the same day Edward is buried within it. Harold will reign for 9 months, and they may be the most brutal 9 months any English king has ever endured. That autumn, England is invaded twice. In September, a Norwegian army lands in the north. Harold marches his men nearly 200 miles and destroys it. This is the Battle of Stamford Bridge, the last great Viking invasion of England. The age that began with longships on the Thames ends here. 3 days later, a second messenger arrives. The Normans have landed in the south. Harold's men have just fought the battle of their lives. Now he marches them the length of England to fight another. On the 14th of October, 1066, near Hastings, the last Saxon king of England falls in battle. On Christmas Day, William the Conqueror is crowned in Edward's Abbey at Westminster. It does not go smoothly. When the crowd inside shouts its acclamation, the Norman guards outside mistake the noise for a riot and begin setting houses on fire. William is crowned King of England while London burns around the church. It is an omen for everything that follows. Because William has a problem. He has conquered England, but he does not trust its largest city, and London is too rich to punish and too powerful to ignore. So he does 2 things. He grants Londoners a charter confirming their ancient rights. The parchment still exists today. And then, in the same breath, he raises something in the city's southeastern corner to remind them exactly who is in charge. A colossal keep of pale stone, 90 feet high, unlike anything England has ever seen. The White Tower, the heart of the Tower of London, and it is watched over the city without interruption for nearly 1,000 years. A charter in one hand, a fortress in the other. That is the deal. For the next 4 centuries, all of medieval London lives within that deal. Kings squeezing the city for money, the city squeezing back for rights. And the city has plenty to squeeze with. In 1176, London begins replacing the old timber river crossing with a stone bridge. It takes 33 years to finish. When it is done, Old London Bridge is unlike anything else in Europe. 19 arches, and running along its entire length, a full street. Houses, shops, even a chapel, all suspended over the rushing Thames. People are born on the bridge. People live and die on the bridge. And from 1305, the severed heads of traitors stare down from spikes above its gatehouse. The first belongs to William Wallace. By now, London is a city of church bells. More than 100 parishes packed within the walls, all beneath Old St. Paul's, whose spire soars higher than any building in England. And beneath the bells, money. The guilds, the mercers, the goldsmiths, the fishmongers of Billingsgate. By 1215, they matter so much that when the barons corner King John at Runnymede, London's mayor stands among them, seal in hand, not a nobleman, but a merchant. From this point on, the city chooses its own leader. A merchant's son like Richard Whittington can rise to govern London 4 times over. Yes, Dick Whittington was real. 80,000 people packed into 1 square mile, the largest city in England by 3 times. And in the autumn of 1348, ships bring something new up the Thames. No one understands what it is. People simply begin dying, first by the dozen, then by the 100, then faster than the living can bury them. The city opens emergency burial grounds outside the walls. At East Smithfield, the dead are not thrown into pits. They are laid out carefully, respectfully, in long trenches, 5 layers deep. You can only do that when you have run out of everything except compassion. In 18 months, the Black Death kills roughly half of London, half of everyone. And here is the strange twist. For those who survive, life gets better. Workers are suddenly scarce, so wages soar, until the crown tries to claw them back with a brutal poll tax. In 1381, tens of thousands of furious peasants march on London, and sympathizers inside the city open the gates. They burn the Savoy Palace to the ground. They storm the Tower of London itself, the fortress built to be unstormable, and drag out the Archbishop of Canterbury. The revolt dies with its leader, Wat Tyler, cut down at Smithfield. The tower is breached once. It will never be breached again. Instead, it becomes something darker, a place people enter and do not leave. Because for 30 years, England tears itself apart. Two branches of the royal family, York and Lancaster, fighting for the crown in the conflict we now call the Wars of the Roses. London watches mostly from the sidelines and banks with the winners. But the war's final act plays out here, inside the tower. In 1483, the king dies suddenly and the crown passes to his son, a 12-year-old boy. Following tradition, the young king is housed in the tower to await his coronation. His 9-year-old brother joins him. That summer, servants catch glimpses of the two boys playing in the tower gardens, less and less frequently, and then never again. They are never seen again. What happened to the princes in the tower remains England's most famous unsolved mystery to this day. Their uncle seizes the crown for himself, but he keeps it for barely 2 years before losing both the throne and his life on a muddy battlefield far from London, defeated by a Welsh exile almost no one in England had ever heard of. His name is Henry Tudor. This Welsh exile becomes King Henry VII, and his first great stroke of genius has nothing to do with any battlefield. He takes Elizabeth of York as his wife, the sister of the two boys who disappeared in the tower. The white rose and the red rose become one. The Tudors have arrived. For 24 years, Henry does something no English king in living memory had managed. Nothing spectacular. He counts his money. He builds quietly. And when his time comes, he hands his son the most secure throne England has seen in 100 years. That son is Henry VIII, and Henry wants the one thing all his father's gold cannot buy: a son of his own. When the Pope refuses to dissolve his marriage, Henry does the unthinkable. He tears England away from the Catholic Church and makes himself the head of a new one. Everywhere else in England, that's a story about faith. In London, it's a story about land. Because as much as a third of this entire city belongs to the church, monasteries, priories, friaries, convents, vast walled estates of gardens and cloisters sitting on the most valuable ground in England. And in 1536, Henry begins taking all of it. Within 5 years, every monastery in London is gone. The buildings come down or get sold off. The monks are pensioned out, or worse. The land gets carved up into grand houses for the men who stayed loyal. It is the largest transfer of property in the whole of London's history. And the strange thing is, you can still hear it. Blackfriars, a Dominican priory, Whitefriars, Spitalfields, the fields of St. Mary's Hospital, and Covent Garden, which was quite literally the convent garden, the walled vegetable patch of Westminster Abbey. The monks are long gone. Their names never left. Stand on the south bank in the year 1600 and look across the river. This is Tudor London in its final years, the city Elizabeth will leave behind. The skyline is still medieval, a forest of church spires beneath old St. Paul's. But look closely at the cathedral. Something is missing. Its great spire, once the tallest in Europe, is gone. Struck by lightning in 1561, it caught fire and collapsed through the roof and was never replaced. The tower stands oddly flat-topped, like a broken crown over the city, and the city beneath it is bursting at its seams. Houses climbing 4 and 5 stories, leaning out over streets that were never made any wider. The wharves push further every year, packed with ships from ports no Londoner's grandfather had ever known. The old Roman wall still stands, still guarded each night, but London has finally outgrown it. For the first time in 1,000 years, the city is spilling beyond its walls, building out into the fields, and connecting everything, as it has for 3 centuries, the bridge. Old London Bridge is at the peak of its strange life. The houses on it now rise 6 and 7 stories, and at its southern end stands the most celebrated Tudor landmark of all, Nonsuch House. A wooden palace 4 stories tall, prefabricated in Holland, shipped over in pieces, and assembled right there on the bridge using wooden pegs. Not a single nail. A flat-pack palace sitting on a 400-year-old bridge over a rushing river. Still the only way to cross the Thames on foot. And the city keeps growing. Trade with Russia, with the Levant, with the New World. Refugees flooding in from Europe's religious wars, bringing skills with them, weaving, printing, banking. In the space of a single century, London multiplies by 4, 50,000 people to 200,000. And on the very last day of that century, the 31st of December, 1600, a group of London merchants signs a charter for a new venture. They call it the East India Company. It will one day govern 500 million people. But all this growth comes with a problem. The city fathers are strict men. Plays, gambling, bear baiting, all of it banned inside the walls. So Londoners simply cross the river. Bankside, directly across the bridge, is the city's shadow. Out beyond the reach of order, everything forbidden thrives. The bear pits, the taverns, and a strange new invention called the playhouse. In the winter of 1598, one theatre company loses the lease on its playhouse north of the city. So they do something remarkable. Over Christmas, while the landlord is away, they take the whole building apart, beam by beam, carry the timber through the streets, across the river, and raise it all again on Bankside. They name it the Globe. A 20-sided ring of oak and plaster open to the sky. 3 galleries stacked around a bare stage. 3,000 people could fit inside. A penny to stand in the yard, more for a seat under the thatch. No scenery, no lighting, just words. And the words come from the company's own resident playwright, a glover's son from Stratford named William Shakespeare. Hamlet is first performed here. So is King Lear. The most famous theatre in the history of the world, built from second-hand timber in the part of the city the authorities were ashamed of. Then in 1603, Elizabeth, the last Tudor, dies without a child. The crown passes north to her Scottish cousin, King James. He inherits the greatest city in Europe. And within 2 years, a group of men will pack 36 barrels of gunpowder beneath his throne. It is the night before Parliament opens. Midnight, the 4th of November, 1605. A search party makes its way through the cellars beneath the House of Lords by lantern light and finds a tall man standing guard over a pile of firewood. Beneath the wood, 36 barrels of gunpowder. In his pocket, matches. His name is Guy Fawkes. 1 day later, and he would have wiped out the king and England's entire governing class in a single instant. Instead, London lights bonfires in celebration. It still does. Every 5th of November, 400 years later. The city James rules is now the largest in Europe, 400,000 people. Coaches jam streets that were built for handcarts. And take a close look at those streets, because they matter. Timber houses jutting out story over story, roofs of thatch, warehouses packed with pitch, tar, oil. London is not just a city. It is a city built from fuel. The new king's son, Charles, believes God placed him on the throne. So parliaments, taxes, consent, all optional as far as he is concerned. London disagrees. In 1642, Charles marches soldiers into the Commons to arrest 5 members. They have already slipped away into the city, which refuses to give them up. The king abandons his own capital. He will only return to die. Civil war splits England, and London chooses Parliament. The whole city starts digging, an 18-kilometre ring of trenches and forts. Tens of thousands working with shovels, women and children among them. Those defences are never actually attacked. They don't need to be. London's money grinds the king down until there is nothing left to fight with. And then Parliament does something no one in Europe believes possible. They put their king on trial. In Westminster Hall itself, that same vast Norman hall his ancestors built, where kings once held their coronation feasts, a king now sits as a prisoner, refusing to even take off his hat. We can still see Westminster as it looked, drawn from life just 2 years earlier from across the river. The Great Hall, the Abbey rising behind it, and the small Parliament House that Guy Fawkes once tried to destroy. The men inside it have now done what Fawkes never managed. They have sentenced the king to death. 3 days later, on the coldest morning anyone can remember, Charles is walked from St. James's Palace across the frozen park to Whitehall. Drums beating all around him the entire way, and there he steps through a window onto a scaffold, beneath the ceiling he himself commissioned, painted to celebrate the divine right of kings. One stroke of the axe. 11 joyless years later, England gives up on revolution. The dead king's son comes home to ringing bells. The theatres reopen, and a young naval clerk named Samuel Pepys begins keeping a diary. Lucky for us, because Pepys is about to witness the 2 worst years in London's history. 1665. Summer. People begin dying in the parish of St. Giles. This time there is a system. Infected houses are sealed shut, the living locked inside with the dying. Doors marked with a red cross. Lord, have mercy upon us. Carts collect the dead by night. The court flees. The wealthy flee. Pepys stays and writes of grass growing in the streets of Whitehall. At the worst point, over 7,000 deaths in a single week. By winter, around 100,000 Londoners are dead. 1 in 5. The survivors think God's anger is spent. The 2nd of September, 1666, 1 in the morning. A bakery on Pudding Lane catches fire. The Lord Mayor is woken, scoffs that a woman could put it out, and goes back to bed. But it hasn't rained in months, and a gale is blowing from the east. By morning, 300 houses are gone, and the fire has reached the riverside warehouses. The pitch, the tar, the oil. Now it is a firestorm, generating its own wind, leaping across streets, moving faster than men can pull houses down ahead of it. For 3 days, London burns from end to end. On the 3rd day, it takes Old St. Paul's. The heat splits its stones like cannon fire. The lead roof melts and runs down Ludgate Hill. An eyewitness wrote that the very pavements glowed. When the wind finally drops, 4 days, 13,200 houses, 87 churches, nearly 90% of the walled city, the London of Chaucer, of Whittington, of Shakespeare, gone. 100,000 people without homes, and the official death toll, 6. The bridge survives, the tower survives, but medieval London, 6 centuries in the making, has ceased to exist in 96 hours. And while the ashes are still warm, a 33-year-old professor of astronomy is already walking the ruins with a roll of paper under his arm. He has a plan. The man with the roll of paper is Christopher Wren, astronomer, mathematician, and barely an architect at all. His plan is magnificent. Wide avenues, grand piazzas, a rational city of stone drawn up while the ground is still hot. And London rejects it, because every burned plot still has an owner, and 100,000 homeless owners cannot wait for a masterpiece. So London rebuilds fast, on its old medieval street lines. Walk the city today, and the roads still wander like a village, because underneath, they still are one. The fire destroyed the buildings. It could not destroy the map. But Wren gets the skyline, 51 new churches, and on the hill where the old cathedral burned, his masterpiece. 35 years of construction, a dome unlike anything England had ever seen, rising above the rooftops like a second sun. St. Paul's, finished in 1711. Wren was almost 80 when he lived to see it completed. He is buried inside. The rebuilt city soon finds new masters too. In 1714, the crown passes to a German cousin, George, then his son, George, then his grandson, George, then his son, George. A full century under a single name, which is why everything built in this era, the townhouses, the squares, the elegant terraces, still carries it today. Georgian. And the Georgian city runs on a new fuel, coffee. A penny a cup. London's coffee houses become offices, newsrooms, and trading floors all at once. In one of them, a man named Lloyd hosts ship owners trading gossip about voyages. It becomes Lloyd's of London. In another, brokers thrown out of the Royal Exchange for being too disruptive set up their own shop. It becomes the Stock Exchange. Modern finance is not born in a palace. It is born over coffee in the ashes of the fire. Not every fuel is so gentle. In the 1720s, London discovers cheap gin and nearly drinks itself to death. Drunk for a penny, the signs promise. At the height of the craze, 1 in every 4 homes in certain slums is selling it. Some winters, the city holds a party on the river itself. The old bridge's arches choke the current so much that in a bitter frost, the Thames freezes solid, and Londoners build an entire city on the ice. Stalls and taverns, whole oxen roasted over open flames, printing presses turning out keepsakes for the crowds. Frost fairs, thrown on a river that will never freeze again. But the bridge's long reign is drawing to a close. In 1750, Westminster Bridge opens, the first new crossing in 500 years. Within a decade, the houses that lined Old London Bridge are torn down. After 6 centuries, the street over the river is just a bridge. The century still has one last fire in it. In 1780, a protest against Catholic rights tears the city apart in a week of rioting, the worst London has ever seen. Newgate Prison is stormed and set ablaze, its inmates turned loose into the darkness. Hundreds are dead before the army takes the streets back. Then, in 1801, Britain counts its people for the very first time. The census reaches London, 1 million souls. The little settlement by the river crossing is now the greatest city in the Western world. The first city to hold 1 million people since ancient Rome. Only Beijing, on the far side of the earth, is still larger. That won't last much longer. 30 years after the census, London loses its oldest companion. In 1831, Old London Bridge, 600 years old, the street over the river, the survivor of the Great Fire, is finally pulled down. And with its arches gone, so too are the frost fairs. With the river running free, the Thames will never freeze solid again. It's exactly the right signal for what lies ahead, because the next 70 years will remake almost everything. In 1834, the old Palace of Westminster, the medieval warren that Guy Fawkes failed to destroy, burns to the ground by accident, an overheated stove. In its place rises the building the whole world pictures when it thinks of London, the Gothic Houses of Parliament, and a clock tower housing a 13-ton bell, Big Ben. And in 1837, an 18-year-old girl inherits the throne. Her name is Victoria. She will reign for 63 years, and everything raised during those years will carry her name. What she inherits is a monster. London doubles, then doubles again. 2 million people, 4 million, 6. The largest city in the entire history of the human race. Nobody has ever had to run anything this big before. The wealthy West End gleams with gaslight and painted stucco. 3 miles to the east, families of 8 are crowded into single rooms. A young reporter named Charles Dickens walks these streets at night and turns everything he sees into novels that make the whole world stop and stare. What feeds the monster is steam. Britain has become the world's first industrial nation, and everything it produces, ships, iron, cloth, flows through London. Railways drive into the city from every direction. 9 great stations in 40 years. Whole neighborhoods leveled to make way for them. The docks swell into the warehouse of the planet. Tea, timber, wool, silk. A forest of masts stretching for miles downstream. And the coal that powers all of it hangs over the city like a shroud. The infamous London fog that the whole world will come to know. But the monster has a problem. Every drain in London empties into the Thames, and the Thames is the same river the city drinks from. Cholera kills tens of thousands. Nobody can explain why, until a doctor named John Snow, and yes, that really is his name, maps the deaths around a single water pump and proves the unthinkable. London is poisoning itself. Then comes the summer of 1858. Hot, dry, and the river becomes an open sewer so foul that Parliament, in its brand new building, soaks its curtains in lime chloride and debates abandoning the city. They call it the Great Stink. It takes the stench reaching those in power to unlock the money. An engineer named Joseph Bazalgette takes on the task and delivers the largest civil engineering project the world has ever seen. Over 1,000 miles of sewers, embankments that reshape the riverbanks themselves, and quietly, he builds every pipe far wider than anyone said was necessary. "We're only going to do this once," he said. His sewers still serve London to this day. The city solves its traffic problem the same way, by doing something no city had ever dared before. In 1863, London opens the world's first underground railway. Steam trains running through tunnels beneath the streets. People predict mass suffocation. Instead, 9 million journeys are made in the very first year. Every metro system on Earth, Tokyo, New York, Paris, descends from this hole in the ground. But the monster keeps its shadows. In the autumn of 1888, in the poorest streets of the East End, a killer the newspapers call Jack the Ripper murders at least 5 women and is never caught. The world's first mass media panic. The city that invented the modern police force taunted in its own headlines. And still it grows. Tower Bridge rises in 1894, a working drawbridge dressed up like a Gothic castle, instantly becoming the city's front door. By 1900, 6 million people. 1 human being in every 250 alive on Earth lives in London. Then, in January 1901, Victoria dies, and an entire way of life seems to end with her. Her city has never been richer, her empire has never been larger, and the 20th century is about to test both. The new century begins politely enough. Motorcars, electric trams, the empire at its absolute peak. Then one night in 1915, Londoners look up and see a shape caught in the searchlights. A German Zeppelin dropping bombs on a city that has not been touched by an enemy in 800 years. The damage is small, the message is enormous. The sky is no longer safe, and the sky is where the next war will come from. September 1940. The Luftwaffe arrives over London and then comes back every single night for 57 nights in a row. Londoners do something no military planner had anticipated. They adapt. 100,000 of them sleep on underground platforms. The tunnels that once carried them to work now keep them alive. They queue for the morning train past buildings that no longer exist. Shops blown open overnight put up signs reading, "More open than usual." But the worst night is saved for the end of the year. The 29th of December, 1940. The Luftwaffe targets the old city itself with tens of thousands of incendiary bombs, and London's second Great Fire begins. The square mile burns exactly as it did in 1666, right up to the foot of St. Paul's. And there, history changes its mind. On the cathedral roof, a volunteer firewatch team smothers the incendiaries as they land. Churchill's order is blunt. St. Paul's must be saved at all costs. And in the middle of the firestorm, a photographer on a nearby rooftop captures the photograph of the century, the dome rising untouched from a sea of smoke and flame. In 1666, the cathedral had been the fire's greatest victim. In 1940, it becomes the symbol that London does not die. The war grinds on, and the deaths come without pattern. Flying bombs whose engines cut out, followed by 12 seconds of silence before the blast. Rockets faster than sound, the explosion arriving before the warning. By 1945, London has won, and it looks like it lost. Entire districts flattened, a third of the old city in ruins. The largest empire in history suddenly too expensive to keep. And the city has one more killer waiting, one it built itself. December 1952, a freezing, windless week. The cold smoke of a million chimneys, the famous London fog that Dickens wrote about and tourists had romanticized, simply stops moving. For 5 days, the city breathes its own exhaust. Buses crawl behind men walking ahead with flares. And when it finally lifts, thousands are dead. The fog was never romantic. It was the Industrial Revolution presenting its bill. The coal age ends. The empire ends. The docks empty. And for the first time in 300 years, London begins to shrink. It shrinks by 2 million people. The bomb sites stay vacant. The empire dissolves, colony by colony, and the docks, the warehouse of the planet, collapse in slow motion. Ships grow too large for the old basins. Trade moves downstream, and one by one the gates close. Even the new queen, crowned in 1953, rides her golden coach through a city full of holes. But while the old city shrinks, a new one is quietly arriving. In 1948, a ship called the Empire Windrush docks at Tilbury, carrying hundreds of passengers from the Caribbean, invited to help rebuild the mother country. More follow from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Cyprus, Hong Kong. They drive the buses, they staff the new health service, they open shops that never close. They receive a cold welcome, and they stay anyway. And their children will make this the most international city on earth. The old capital still has its style. For one strange decade, the whole planet watches London. The Beatles on a rooftop, miniskirts on Carnaby Street, a grey city suddenly bursting into color. But swinging London is a costume over a struggling body. By the 70s, the last docks are closing for good. The Isle of Dogs, once the busiest port on the planet, falls silent. Then in 1986, the city takes off its bowler hat. They call it the Big Bang. In a single day, London's stock market tears up its old rules, goes electronic, and explodes. Money floods in from everywhere, and on the dead docks of the Isle of Dogs, something impossible takes shape. A second city of glass towers. Canary Wharf, skyscrapers packed with the world's money, standing exactly where the world's cargo used to land. The docks didn't die. They were reborn. London relearns its oldest lesson. It doesn't survive by staying the same. It survives by becoming something else entirely. The new century tests it, as every century has. In 2005, terrorists bomb 3 underground trains and a bus. 52 Londoners from 18 different countries are killed. The city grieves, and the next morning gets back on the tube. It has, after all, done this before. And then in 2015, a line quietly crosses on a graph. London's population passes its 1939 peak. The city that shrank for 40 years is bigger than it has ever been. 9 million people, 300 languages, still growing. Rewind this city and watch it survive in reverse. Bombed for 57 nights, burned to the ground, decimated by plague, sacked by Vikings, abandoned by Rome, burned by Boudicca. Until 2,000 years ago, there is nothing left at all, just an empty riverbank. Everything since, every death, every resurrection, built this. 9 million people from every nation on earth, living on top of 20 centuries.